Joining me now is Rachel Roubein, reporter covering health and abortion rights for the Washington Post, and with me on set, Gabe Gutierrez, who's covering the fight on the 2024 race through, these days, the prism of abortion. Rachel, let me start with you. I think that's the big fallout 1 year later is the unintended consequences, or maybe some would argue they were intended consequences, but the fall-on effect for women's health, for women that are trying to get pregnant, for women that have pregnancies that don't that can't come finished to term. This seems to be perhaps what the anti-abortion rights side didn't see coming.
And Chuck, first, thank you for having me. I think we did a big story. We talked to, roughly 30 people, and sort of we found several sort of big takeaways. You mentioned the study from KFF on OBGYNs. One of the big takeaways that we found in our reporting is that abortion access has entered a kind of fragile new phase here. And 1 year after the fall of Roe, the full impact of the ruling is still being explored. It still remains in flux. About 17.5 million women of reproductive age live in states where abortion is banned or mostly banned. As you mentioned, that is roughly 15 states.
So, Rachel, so we had the fall-on effect on OBGYNs. When it comes to more, what's the next? Are there going to be more in these states that have gotten rid of bans? Do we expect more attempts at even curtailing the ability to cross state lines? Or are some lawmakers realizing there's a big backlash against that?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I mean, I think there's a few things that are looming large right now. One is the 2024 election cycle. There are abortion rights groups that are working to try and get abortion onto the ballot in states like Missouri and Florida. There's, of course, the 2024 presidential election. And something that we saw this year during state legislative sessions, particularly in Nebraska and North Carolina, among some Republican lawmakers, there was resistance to banning abortion early in pregnancy. Those two states enacted bans at 12 weeks in pregnancy. So we did see some backlash within the Republican Party. As you mentioned, that there were some states that still did pass bans further in pregnancy, particularly Florida, which is governed by Governor Ron DeSantis, now GOP presidential candidate. Right.
In fact, let me bring in Gabe Gutierrez. He actually covers DeSantis for us. He's here because Faith and Family is here, a big sort of a Republican cattle call of sorts of the candidates. I think what's interesting is that abortion has divided this Republican field, and we weren't sure how it was going to do it, but it really hasn't. And the candidate you're covering, he has decided to own the 6-week ban that is not in effect yet in Florida.
Yeah, that's right, Chuck. And as you said, Faith and Freedom kicking off just this afternoon. I was there and spoke with several of the attendees, and they really like what they see from Ron DeSantis. No surprise, the 6-week abortion ban. And they see it, he's going to the right of former President Trump. And DeSantis keeps bringing up this issue, too, that, he'd do a better job picking Supreme Court justices, which is incredible when you think about it.
He thinks the Supreme Court is not conservative.
Correct. That's exactly what he thinks. And he says that he would pick justices that are along the lines with Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas. And he actually is trying to make the case that the justices that former President Trump chose weren't conservative enough. That argument, though, and I spoke with several of the attendees, look, they think that former President Trump, to them, did an incredible job as they see it, obviously, because, he helped overturn Roe v. Wade, but it's something that's coming up at this conference and will over the coming months.
Well, that's what I'm curious about. Are they looking for an absolutist position on this? Or, you have Tim Scott saying, hey, look, I'm going to sign what I can, but he's almost open to a federal ban being at 15 or 20 weeks, and 20 weeks to some might not seem like a ban at all.
Look, and the question is, how does this play in the general election, right? But the way the DeSantis team, from the conversations that I've been having, they are laser focused on this GOP primary. They are laser focused on Iowa, and they think that this position, this conservative position on abortion, they think it's going to get them there in Iowa, and then they'll worry about the general election. But they're not concerned about that at this point. So while some other GOP candidates may be staking a different type of position from the DeSantis point of view, he wants to go conservative, and he thinks it'll help him, especially among this constituency.
All right. Let me put a pin in this. I'm going to put you back to work in a minute here, Gabe. Rachel, I'll let you go. Really appreciate it. It's incredible work you guys did at the Post. It was definitely something we consumed very well here, so thank you for that. And let me bring in the rest of my panel. Lisa Desjardins, correspondent for PBS NewsHour. Jen Psaki, the former White House press secretary and host of Inside with Jen Psaki on MSNBC, and former RNC chairman Michael Steele. He's also an NBC News political analyst. Michael Steele, I want to start with you. We're not divided on abortion as a country, and yet our politics act as if we are.
Right.
At what point does the Republican Party admit that there's a consensus here and they need to lean into it?
Oh, they won't. I mean, to Gabe's reporting, they won't. I mean, it's very clear. They're not going to pivot away from this. This has been a 50-year-long battle that they ostensibly won, all right, in one sense. But now moving from the idea that the states would control this conversation and they will decide individually, as we've showed in the polling that you've done, that's not enough. And the next piece now is, okay, we're going to broaden the lens out and we're going to narrow the focus. So we're going to broaden it out to the entire country, okay, and we're going to narrow it down to 6 weeks. And you're going to eventually see a situation, I think narratively, where they're going to talk about an absolute ban. It is illegal, zero, no weeks allowed. And that's ostensibly, at the end of the day, where they want to go.
You know, Lisa, what I think's been remarkable, you know, there's some major stories that happen, and, you know, political strategists will say, oh, this will play one way or another voters, but the voters don't pay attention. I find it remarkable that voters they absolutely know what's been happening with abortion rights. They know state by state. I mean, we don't have a lot of don't knows in this poll.
Right.
Well, are there any more political issues that are more firmly woven into our political fabric over the last 20? Go back to Ronald Reagan.
How about our personal lives?
That's right.
I think that's what
that's
it
right.
is. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The stakes are personal. They're for your family. They're for people you know. They're for your church. All of that. I do think when I looked at the polling that you all did, something that popped out to me was that when you ask, is it too difficult? Is it too easy in your state? Almost no one has changed over the past year, except there are more people by double digits who say it's more difficult in my state.
Right.
That is big for Democrats.
It is huge. I mean, Jen, I mean, this, to me, it's like, you sit there and say, you know, people have this argument, does Biden really want to run against Trump? And it's like, does it matter? Is abortion Trump?
I mean, abortion was such a driver, as we all know, in the midterm elections.
Do you think bigger driver than the bad candidates?
I suspect it was a bigger driver than we anticipated, and also than people probably gave it credit for. And, you know, I think Gabe very accurately portrayed the differences between the candidates. It doesn't matter in terms of how Biden and the Democrats run against the nominee, likely Trump. But though Trump has not said he's for an abortion ban, he has bragged about his role in the Supreme Court and his role in the Dobbs decision. They will tie that around his neck.
They will, but in a weird way, Trump has given so many answers. And there's other ways that they run against Trump. But if it's any other candidate, abortion's the centerpiece of the election.
Of course it is. And I think it is still a central issue with Trump as well, because of his role in the Supreme Court. We saw the polling that the Supreme Court is at a 30% approval rating. All of these things. Women, many Democrats have kind of been awakened by all of this. And so my point is that Democrats, the Biden campaign, the DNC, regardless, they're going to tie this issue to the Republican nominee and the Republican candidates.
Gabe, when you talk to some of these voters, do you sense any of them going, God, I wish abortion wasn't at the front and center?
No, at least the ones at this conference.
Yeah, with this conference.
This is such
but I'm
a
talking about
personal
places
thing.
like Iowa and some of these other.
You know, in Iowa, something that stuck out at me is when I went to some of the early DeSantis events. You know, and many other parts of the country, we talk about the ongoing feud with Disney. There's huge questions about how that's going to play politically around the country. But among certain constituencies in Iowa, among those evangelical voters, it spoke to them on a deep personal level, as you were discussing.
It wasn't about Disney World, was it? This was about taking
this was about their kids.
Yeah.
you know, they really looked at this at their core. This is something that they responded to immediately. He got standing ovations when he talked about Disney. You know, it's not a business dispute for them. So for them, you know, those evangelical voters, they do see, you know, abortion as a key issue. Now the question is, you know, another place like New Hampshire, he didn't talk about abortion quite so much in New Hampshire. But again, he's focused, laser focused on certain states, Iowa, South Carolina, tailoring his message a little differently in New Hampshire. But for him, Iowa is huge.
I have this thesis, Lisa, and I'll be curious what you think of it, that the rank and file Republicans aren't as strident on this issue as the activists are, and these politicians are playing to the activists.
It depends on which rank and file. If you talk to, I cannot imagine many U.S. senators who are Republicans who want to go to the right of Ron DeSantis on abortion. They don't. And Mitch McConnell doesn't want them to either because he wants to get the Senate back. The House conference is different for Republicans. They are divided. There are dozens who feel that way. Probably a majority does not, but it is divided there.
I could not agree more. And here's the X factor in all of this for Republicans. It's a state called Kansas. Because at the end of the day, I think the activists and the party leadership and the Ron DeSantis's woefully underestimate where Republican women will line up on this thing when they get in the ballot box. When they get in that room and they're thinking about their daughter and they're thinking about their granddaughter and the world they're about to create for them, where their access to health decisions. So for a lot of these Republican women that I know that I spoke to, this was less about abortion. It was more about their autonomy to make a decision for themselves, which the party has always argued.
Well, and this is a bigger question I have for you, Michael, and Jen, I'm sure you want to comment on this, which is when you look at this by age, obviously, you want to talk about waking up an electorate, right?
Yeah.
You know, 18 to 30-year-olds, everybody says, oh, they don't actually vote. Well, they showed up, right? They showed up in Wisconsin. I mean, this could be a generational mistake for the Republican Party if they're not careful. Like, all of a sudden, things could go off a cliff for them in about 10 years when more of these Gen Z voters are actively voting.
That's absolutely true. And I also wouldn't underestimate people between 30 and 50 either. Obviously a stronger voting bloc historically, but people are thinking about their daughters and the generation that is coming up next, what the impact is going to be in states where they're living. Do I want to raise my daughter in Texas, for example? I mean, a lot of Democratic, independent, Republican women might say, no, because their rights are going to be restricted. So I do think unless they wind it back, and even in the Republican field, though, I will say, Nikki Haley clearly is trying to, like, skirt the way on this. Chris Christie, I mean, they're all
Nikki Haley and Tim Scott strike me as whatever they think the audience wants to hear, they tell them.
Correct.
And I we may have gone too far.
But they
have that feel to them.
recognize.
At least they read a room. I'll give them that.
They read the room. They recognize the politics of it.
Super quick note, though. I think that there is a young core of conservatives. We're talking about young voters overall do not want Roe overturned. Agreed. However, there is a very fervent, maybe more fervent than we've seen in a generation, core of young conservatives who
it's
are
almost like reactionary.
very
The turning
anti-abortion.
point,
Yes.
the Charlie Kirk crew. No, he has created. It's a small but very loud bunch.
I don't know how small it is. I don't know.
Right.
They're active.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.